Wild and Weird Campfire Stories by Rusty Wilson. Narrated by Tom Daniels. Davy and I had been friends since as long as I can remember. We were neighbors. He lived a few houses down from me, and we were both adopted, so that was a singular bond between us. Plus, we were almost the same age, only a year apart. We were both only children, as neither set of our parents could have kids. Sometimes we joked that we were really secret brothers, and for some reason that consoled us. I think it gave us a birth family that we didn't have otherwise. We even looked a bit alike, and sometimes people did mistake us for brothers. Davy was older, and he was taller and more gangly than I was, but we both had freckles and red hair. We both looked to be pretty much Irish. But for all that, we had our differences, and they could be fairly major. Not major enough to separate us. We would always be close friends. But we seemed to see the world differently in some important ways. Davy was more of a dreamer than I was, while I was the pragmatic and more realistic one. And Davy was an artist. He loved to sketch things, while I was more into building things with my hands and would always be the one whittling a stick or making a wooden boat. These things are important to this story because I think this difference was what led Davy to his obsession with the Royal Canadian Mounties. During the Great Depression, there were a number of colorful and prolific criminals like John Dillinger, Babyface Nelson, and Pretty Boy Floyd, who captivated the attention of both the public and legions of law enforcement agents. But among the legendary names, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow stand alone. Not because their crimes were so much more spectacular, but because they had one thing the others didn't. They were lovers. Partners in crime as well as partners in romance, Bonnie and Clyde captivated the attention of the public. Their exploits became a media sensation. Today, more than 75 years after their deaths in a Louisiana law enforcement ambush, countless books and a number of films have focused largely on the facts, names, dates, places, sums of money stolen, and people killed during their legendary 2-year crime spree. But what about the story beyond the data, beneath the surface of Bonnie and Clyde? Airline Jobs, written by Tuyette V. Crossman. It all began in 1922, when the British Daimler Company started using teenage boys as cabin attendants. They did not serve food and did very little to ensure that the passengers were safe and comfortable. In 1926, another airline company, the Stout Air Service, introduced aerial couriers. These were young men who had very little training and offered dismal service. Flight attending, as we know it today, was started by Ellen Church. She was a nurse and a licensed pilot, but knew because of the sexual stereotypes that were common in the 1920s and 30s, she could not become a commercial pilot. So she convinced the Boeing Air Transport Company to train nurses who can serve people during the flight, since those days airplanes used to fly in low altitudes, hence experiencing a lot of turbulence. She got hired together with 7 other ladies. Those days they were known as stewardesses. It wasn't until the 1970s that the name changed. The first 8 were Ellen Church, Jessie Carter, Margaret Arno, Harriet Fry, Ellis Crawford, Inez Keller, Alva Johnson, and Cornelia Peterman. The original requirements for the nurses or stewardesses were not to exceed 115 pounds and be younger than 25 years. There were also some racist factors involved, though not openly stated, since there seemed to be an all-whites policy in the occupation. Children's Literature. Bridget's Beret by Tom Lichtenheld. Narrated by Tom Daniels. Of course, Bridget had lots of art supplies, but her most important art supply wasn't something to draw or paint with. It was a hat. Not just any old hat, but the big black beret. The kind of hat that lots of great artists wear. Before Bridget made any kind of art, she'd put on her beret and adjust it until it looked just right. It had to have that certain je ne sais quoi. She had no idea what that meant, but she knew that all the great artists needed it to make art.